Espionage. It's one of the world's oldest professions. Every state does it. Russia possesses one of the most effective secret organisations, but, as always, facts should be separated from fiction. But sometimes the truth can be stranger than fiction. The name's Darasz, Jan Darasz. Join me for how we got here.
Arrests last week of alleged Russian spies in Germany. Authorities say 2 men plotted to sabotage US military facilities in an effort to undermine support for Ukraine. And Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk vows to thwart every act of betrayal in the country after a man was detained for allegedly offering airport security information to Russia's GRU military intelligence service, possibly for an assassination attempt on Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. In Germany, the so-called Russiagate scandal has exposed how the Kremlin is seeking to influence the forthcoming European elections by, among other things, allegedly funding a German politician to disseminate anti-Ukrainian and pro-Russian propaganda. Since the Kremlin launched its war in Ukraine, barely a week goes by without news of Russian agents being unmasked. The past few years have been embarrassing for Russia's spies. 2 GRU agents were identified as the would-be assassins who attempted to poison the former Russian agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter in Salisbury, England 6 years ago. In 2020, operatives of the FSB security service botched the poisoning of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. He mocked them for spreading Novichok on his underwear. The FSB also significantly misread Kyiv, providing President Putin with an overly upbeat view of invading Ukraine. Since the start of the war, Russia's SVR Foreign Intelligence Service has seen its presence in Europe decimated. More than 500 officers have been booted out of embassies across the region, severely hampering intelligence gathering. This has led to a change in approach. Moscow's spies are now mounting more coherent propaganda campaigns against Western foes. This can be seen in Moldova, where last year a disinformation campaign against the country's bid for EU membership grew more systematic and focused. President Macron fears Russia will target the Paris Olympics. In February, France exposed a large network of Russian sites spreading disinformation in France, Germany and Poland. According to the Latvian-based Insider website, despite the recent embarrassments, Russia's spy agencies are well embedded in Europe. Investigators published the revelation that a top aide in the Bundestag and a Latvian member of the European Parliament were both Russian agents. The priority for Russian intelligence is to prepare for future conflict with the West. These days, their spies are not just stealing secrets, but widening cracks within NATO and undermining support for Ukraine. The West has its work cut out countering them.
Our guest today is Zygmunt Dzięciołowski, the founding editor of OpenDemocracy Russia and a journalist covering Russian affairs over the last 40 years. Welcome to the programme.
Very happy to be here.
Great to have you. The world of espionage is a great source for entertainment and drama and television and film. The reality is rather more prosaic, isn't it?
Well, it's both. It's prosaic and it's spectacular. Yeah. It really depends which part of this espionage story you're looking at. When we are talking about Russian espionage, or Soviet espionage, or even Russian back in the Tsarist times, it's a very sort of impressive and colorful story full of blood and betrayal and money and women and all what you sort of believe is a part of espionage scene.
Is it the Russian secret services have a very formidable reputation today? Is that overestimation, or is that accurate?
At the moment now, present, I think it's overestimated. It was easier for them before the war and immediately after the war, because the Soviet Union was believed to be communist, represent communist future for the mankind, and we had a lot of left sympathizers and communist sympathizers in the United States, in Britain, and people who were willing to help Soviet Union because of their ideological belief. And all these famous Cambridge five British spies who really pretty high ranking, like Kim Philby, and this is as high as possible in the British espionage. They believed that Soviet Union represented future, and their own countries, they sort of had very bad conscience about colonialism or exploiting working class and this kind of thing. The same is true about spies who leaked the secrets of Manhattan Project, American nuclear program, which led to the creation of the nuclear bomb. And it's very interesting because at some point, Russian physicists, when they received information from Beria about American research program, they really had their own ideas how to improve it. But Beria told them, don't do it, do it exactly as these American guys do it, because that's the guarantee, because he was believed that if they fail with their own program, he'd be a victim of Stalin's anger. So, but Soviet espionage or intelligence wasn't only about information gathering, wasn't about only intelligence gathering. And this is very important to remember that as it is now, and it used to be in the past, Soviets and the Russians target their own exile community.
Yes.
That's very important. People who are active in some kind of emigre activities aimed at, like in the 20s and 30s, destroying the Soviet system. Or emigre nationalists representing Ukrainian nationalist movement, and they were sort of, this famous murder of Leo Trotsky in Mexico in 1940, and General Pavel Sudoplatov, the head of special intelligence unit, who carried out personal instructions of Stalin and murdered one of the leaders of the Ukrainian nationalist movement in 1938 in Rotterdam, Kolomoyev, brought him a box of chocolate. But that's interesting because they had this discussion. He wasn't happy with the first version of the box of chocolate because he needed at least 30 minutes for the box to explode in order to reach the railway station and escape to Paris. But they continued it after the war. And after the war, Bogdan Stashinsky, KGB agent, murdered Stepan Bandera. But they also had some, they failed on one occasion, very famous in the 50s. One of the KGB officers, Viktor Khakhlov, was sent to Germany again to kill one of the Ukrainian nationalists, but he wasn't really happy with that mission, and he came to the guy and told him, "Listen, they told me to kill you, but I'm not going to do it."
That seemed to continue up until Alexander Litvinenko and the current spate.
Not only Litvinenko, just 2 years ago, they murdered in Berlin one of the Chechen nationalist activists, and this guy, I don't remember the Russian guy, he's now in Changoshvili, was the name of the Chechen guy, but the Russian agent is now in German prison. And there was discussion about exchange deal, which would involve him and maybe Alexei Navalny. And we know that Russians are quite interested in getting him out of prison. So that's the reason probably they keep this American journalist Ivan Gershkovich.
They had very effective intelligence organizations in the 1930s and 40s. Richard Sorger in Tokyo, the Lucy Ring, the Red Orchestra in Berlin. They were built up over a number of years. The Russians were the Soviets were very patient in.
It's very complicated, as you know.
Establishing.
As you know, at some point in the late 30s, on Stalin orders, they purged the intelligence service and they killed two persons, Abraham Słutsky and the other guy, Henryk Spiegelglas, two heads of the Soviet intelligence. They had to, for a year, Stalin was blind. He didn't know anything because they had their agents, and they wanted agents to return to demonstrate their loyalty to the Soviet system, and they didn't want to return because they knew the purge was going on. So after execution of Słutsky and Spiegelglas, there was a period of time that Soviet intelligence was in state of crisis. But they were able to rebuild it. They were able to rebuild it, and this was pretty successful work during the war. And getting American secrets about nuclear program.
Yes, I mean, did they build these networks on a Tsarist tradition, or was it from scratch in the after the revolution?
As I said, of course, some technology and know-how, I would say. And in the 20s, when they started to sort things out with the immigrant community in Paris, they used the former Ochrana agents. Ochrana was the name. And Ochrana was also kind of bizarre organization with double agents and agents assassinating government members or members of the Tsarist family. But that's the difference. They had some people who sort of transferred from Tsarist Ochrana to Czeka to extraordinary commission of Felix Dzerzhinsky. But as I said, this is very, very important to remember this. That's the problem of Putin now, because they had a very influential communist movement all over the world. We just don't realize how popular communist idea was, yes, because we want to forget this. But in the 30s or 50s and 60s, intellectuals around the world and in the Western countries, they sort of believe that communism is our future. That's the direction to which we should go. So they had people who were willing to cooperate for ideological reasons.
So now that Russia is not communist, it doesn't have an ideology to offer the world or to offer fellow travelers or naive idealists, the methods are more brutal, aren't they? They include these assassinations, blackmail, that kind of stuff.
You ask a very good question, because I somehow have the impression that we now have, look at Germany, 3.5 million people of former Soviet citizens. And of course, a large part of them believes Putin is right. And this is the same about Russian immigrant community in the United States. So it is possible that people from this part of immigrant community who are fond of Putin and his endeavor to rebuild Russian power and influence, they could be sort of cooperating out of their convictions. But this intelligence espionage thing is about money and blackmail and women. And this
human frailties.
This has not changed. They save no money for this kind of thing. So, but now this goes into several directions. First of all, this is intelligence gathering. This is pretty secret thing, and pretty. I mean, we don't really know much about it. If they have agents in general staff of British or French or German army, this is. But they are also involved in propaganda operations, like encouraging local pro-Russian groups to do things they'd be happy with. They would change the course of things in their favor, and this is the propaganda. This is creating. Ruining our stability. That's their main purpose. With European Union, I mean, it's pretty complicated structure. So they're looking for cracks, and as soon as they see a possibility or potential to widen it, so they go for it.
They're very good on the human intelligence, placing agents, assassinating people, blackmailing people, all that stuff. How good is the Russian Secret Service currently on matters like signals intelligence, which the West always seems to think that it's superior to Russians?
I think
eavesdropping on communications, that kind of thing.
I believe that with all these technological things, high tech, like electronic and satellites and then listening devices, I think the West is better. Americans have better technology. But the Russians have money in order to buy this technology. So they have, let's say, Israel is highly developed modern country with access to this famous Pegasus or this kind of things. In Israel, there are hundreds of thousands of former Russian citizens who, part of them were Putin supporters. The Western world is highly developed, has access to modern technology, but should only organize itself better and to remember that it's an enemy. That's the biggest threat to international security now.
Yes, and they are human after all, and they can be subverted and defeated just as much as they can do to us.
Money, women and blackmail.
Thank you very much, Zygmunt Dzięciołowski. Great to have you on the programme.
Thank you so much.
And that's all we have time for today, so join us next time for How We Got Here.